Welcome to TFP, the Theatrefolk podcast. I am Lindsay Price, resident playwright for Theatrefolk. Hello. I hope you're well. Thanks for listening. Today's podcast is part one of our recent adventures in New York City. But first, let's do some Theatrefolk news. Do you love Romeo and Juliet? Do you hate Romeo and Juliet? Do you have to study Romeo and Juliet and don't know where to start? Start here. Start now. I'm not gonna sing. Okay, the February Theatrefolk newsletter Spotlight is a huge, honkin', shiny, bright beam of an issue all about that Shakespearean trip down teenage love lane, Romeo and Juliet. And just as this podcast is a two-parter, so is the newsletter. When I'm working on the newsletters each month, I have to have a page limit in mind. Because, really, no one has the time or the inclination to sit down to a 50-page newsletter. So when I'm doing something like this particular newsletter is an analysis and exercise issue, which are my favorite, and I can go on and on and on. As I start to ease towards the late teens, I know it's time to stop and make it more than one newsletter. So for this month, we have a discussion on themes and an act-by-act analysis of the play with a gazillion exercises, a gazillion questions. There are handouts galore. I think there are 11 in total. And as we speak, or I speak, or I blather on, as it were, I'm working on part 2 of the newsletter, which is going to focus on language and character. You know, the more I read this play, the more I really like Juliet. I think she's a cool cat and not like Tybalt. I think she really grows into her own throughout the play. I think she actually changes, and despite the one major slip-up where she actually thinks Romeo is worth dying for, I think she's a really great character. And Romeo, the more I read this play, the more I think he's a total bonehead. He is a bonehead from beginning to end. He rashly blundering through the play with lots of sobbing and idiot action and really useless poetry. And on that note, I've in my research read that apparently he moving into blank verse when he speaks that's supposed to denote a change into adulthood. I'm going to focus on that as I move forward with that character, and I'll let you know about that next month. As you can tell, I'm not sure I'm convinced. He is a bonehead. And lastly, where can you find this podcast? We post new episodes every Wednesday at theatrefolk.com and on our Facebook page and Twitter. You can find us on the Stitcher app, and you can, of course, subscribe to TFP on iTunes. All you have to do is search on the word Theatrefolk. Episode 29. New York Part 1. New York, New York. So, Craig and I ended up in the Big Apple last month. Very exciting. It's an amazing city. I always come away very much inspired simply by walking around. I could never live there. I think the intensity would make my little head explode, but I am a willing visitor. And we saw an interesting range of theater while we were there. We got a Broadway, we got an off-Broadway, and a so far off East Village off theatrical experience. And I have to say, it is my most favorite thing to go see, my most favorite theatrical experience. This particular show has been running for years and years and years. We've been going since, I think, 2004, and it's never been the same experience twice. But that's for next week. We'll be going into what that was all about on our next podcast in part 2 of our New York adventure. This week, it's about the Broadway show, which was The Other Place by Char White, and Bethany, the off-Broadway show by Laura Marks. Let's do it. Hello, this is Lindsay and
Craig.
And, well, we're very excited because we are in New York City and we have a lovely view of some theaters from our hotel room.
And Guy Fieri's new restaurant.
And Guy Fieri's new restaurant, which we will not be going to, apparently, because it's, the food is such high class. And so what we wanted to do is that we're here and we're going to see some shows, and we wanted to do a podcast and just kind of talk about them.
So the first show we saw was The Other Place.
Yes, this is a drama. It is a straight play. I chose it because it stars Laurie Metcalf, and Laurie Metcalf has a pretty long-standing television history. She was on Roseanne, and but she's also a Steppenwolf actor, and quite frankly, I've never seen her act in a show, and so I'm like, you know what? Here's a good opportunity. We knew nothing about the show going in, did we?
Absolutely. We knew the title on that, and that Laurie Metcalf was in it.
We knew the title, the Laurie Metcalf, and it was at TKTS booth so that we could just walk up and pick it. We arrived at what it was like 1:15.
Yes.
And the show was at 2.
Checked into the hotel, showered, and went to the show. And Daniel Stern was in it too, we should say.
Yes. He's leaving the show, but yes, Daniel Stern is in it as well. So we get to the theater. First of all, it's a gorgeous theater. Just beautiful. And she's already sitting on stage.
Yeah, I imagine she's there from House Hope until the show starts. It's a one-act play. It's an hour and 20 minutes long. So she's on stage from...
Oh, since the house opens.
Yeah, from the house opens, so probably half hour, so 150 minutes. Yeah. So over 2 hours, she's on stage
the entire time, because it really is her show. And the set is really I really found this show to be a really awesome. Well, it was a Broadway show, like. You get a little bit of, you buy your ticket and sometimes you get a little bit of sticker shock. Like, it's like, oh my God, I'm paying this much to go see a play.
4 people in it.
I'm spending money like this on a play. And that was the first thing I thought when I walked out was I got my money's worth, just the whole combination of from the script to the actors to the sound to the technology that was used to the set. And so the first thing you see is this. It kind of looks like a cage of... I thought when I saw it...
Ooh, a cage.
I thought it was it looks like to me a cage of old windows from...
Yes. It's a semicircular I guess I didn't see it as a cage, but in context of the show, the phrase cage works, I think. But I just saw it as a backdrop, a semicircular backdrop of... Yeah, picture frame or window frames.
And then it was just so fantastically used because the semicircle of window frames becomes chairs and doorways, and it was at one point Daniel Stern opened up a little doorway where it was the medicine cabinet in a bathroom.
Mm-hmm. There were little bits of neon lights hidden in it that would come on at different points to delineate different types of settings.
And just so it was just this symbolic space, but used as everything and used as different locations.
Pretty much a unit set, and behind upstage of the picture frames was a psych that was used for like multimedia stuff.
Yes, because this main character, she works as she's a neuroscientist.
Yes, researcher.
A researcher for a drug
company.
A drug company. And what happens is that she comes across as this, this ball buster, a little bit, caustic sense of humor, and she's got really high heels on, and she's talking about this presentation, and then little bit by little bit by little bit by little bit, everything falls apart. Mm-hmm. And what's so wonderful, I thought, about the script was we're set up to believe one set of rules for this family, for this character, for what's happening. and then one of those rules, oh, no, that's not true. And so then you're set up with a whole other set of rules, and oh, well, guess what? That's not true. And then you're set up with another, and then it just, as the rules get set up, they get knocked down, and knocked up, and knocked down.
Yeah. For me, it was a very, very vivid examination of how the willing suspension of disbelief works in the theater. When we're rehearsing a play, we always think, oh, they're never going to buy this, or we always work so hard to kind of create some kind of world that the audience will involve themselves in, where the fact is that when the audience sits down, they'll accept whatever it is that you tell them. And this was a great example of that, because at the beginning of the play, we were kind of led into one story that bit by bit by bit got transformed into something completely different. So everything we were told turned out to not be true.
And what was so wonderful is that she came across as a very credible narrator. And
well, she's a scientist, a fact-based person.
And how interesting that, okay, if someone looks like this and talks like this, then they must be credible. And what happens when they're not?
Yeah.
Because that's what basically she turns out to be the most uncredible narrator of them all. Okay, so tell me one thing that you're still thinking about almost an hour later. What's one thing that you're still thinking about this play?
I wish this is a play. Unfortunately, we can't really talk about
you know what,
the things that happen in it. But
okay, if you're going to go see The Other Place, stop listening now.
To me, it was the last image that was projected onto the screen of the girl. I won't say any more than that, but it just brings everything together. I thought it was a really well written script, and just in terms of engagement, in terms of threads, just here's one little thread, and then it gets picked back up and gets picked back up. Okay, no, wait a minute. I'm going to take that back and say something else that I can talk about in detail.
Okay, do it.
This is a play that was 4 actors, 2 of whom played the same character. The other 2 played various characters throughout the play. And the play must have had, took place in a dozen different locations,
yes.
Maybe more?
Yes, and time periods.
It went back and forth in time. It took place in all these different places. Not a single blackout.
Oh, yeah.
Not a single pause between moving from scene to scene.
To the point it was jarring that you had to catch up. And I loved that. I loved that they went, hey, guess what? You want to be in this play? You better come along for the ride.
Yeah.
We're not waiting for you.
Yeah, the first few scenes of the play really, they were very challenging to me. I had a lot of trouble following what was happening because I thought we were going somewhere and we ended up somewhere else. And but to me, that fast transition from scene to scene was something I so desperately crave for in the theater, because nothing drives me crazier than sitting in black.
Unnecessary blackout.
Yeah, it's completely unnecessary. If you don't believe me, just go see this play. Just watch how fast these scenes change. And it's not even, there's no scenery change really. There's one moment where there's a little bit of a set change when the set goes up and there's a set behind it. But apart from that, it's really just lighting
and acting
and sound that brings us to a different place. They're not changing costumes. They just are in another place, and we just accept it. We don't need to have
coddled.
This. Yeah, we don't need to be coddled. That's what I take away from this show.
I take away 2 things. First of all, Laurie Metcalf played essentially a vile woman. She was not a nice woman.
Very unlikable.
Very unlikable, and I never disengaged. I was engaged from the whole time, and that's big for me. I'm I'll find any excuse to disengage from something. So the fact that she held my attention and that I felt sorry for her and that I really went with her journey. And something else I want to talk about that Laurie Metcalf did, which just thrilled me to bits, was the focus on the physicality of her character. And she wasn't outrageous and arms akimbo all over the place. I just couldn't help but watch her feet and the way that she grounded this character in the feet, the way that she used these spiky heels, and the way that she walked. And she always stood very specifically, and she always It was always a very specific stance and a very specific twist to the feet. And then that started to change very gradually. We went from very spiky-heeled shoes to sensible high-heeled shoes. We went from sensible high-heeled shoes to no shoes. And then at the end, when her transformation was complete, the very last image of we have is her sitting with her back to the audience, and her feet were very specifically placed. You noticed that too.
That is what I noticed. Now I wish I had noticed it earlier in the show. I mean, there was some business made of shoes at the beginning, but I didn't know. I'm not a shoe person, so
See,
I wasn't
unfortunately,
noticing the shoes changing.
I'm a shoe person, and I'm psychotic about that kind of thing. I just thought, I know it was on purpose, and it was.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I'd love to go watch just for that.
Wonderfully purposefully done. And then the second thing I wanted to note was about the woman who played the multiple parts.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, everyone is there to serve Larry Metcalf. Everyone is there to serve this main character. And there's a point in the play where one of the other women characters is there for a very specific reason and is there for a very specific breakdown of Laurie Metcalf's character. And she could have been easily written as a shell. She could have been easily written as just a, hey, I'm here to support this
well, so much, I think I know the scene you're talking about. So when that scene started, I thought, oh, this scene's unneeded.
And what was so wonderful, it was just so wonderful because this character had background, this character had her own problems, this character did not need to talk to Juliana is the name of Laurie Metcalf's character. She was intruding, and at one point this woman had to make a choice. And when she did, I was pulling Kleenex out of my purse because this woman was such an individual. She was written as an individual, played as an individual, and therefore when she had to make a choice to submit and support Larry Metcalf's character, it was so amazing. It was a wonderful theatrical moment.
And that was writing too.
Yeah. Absolutely. As a playwright, I was like, I'm all about your small characters.
They need to have as full lives as everyone else.
They need full lives, and I felt this character had a full life. And because she had a full life, that moment was made all the more special. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you didn't like about the play?
I actually didn't really care for Laurie Metcalf being on stage before the show started.
Yeah,
it makes me feel awkward. I don't know if I'm supposed to be watching her, and I never quite. It happens from time to time in the theater. I'm never quite sure of the merit of it.
I was not 100%. I thought Daniel Stern was giving it his all, and I'm not quite 100% sure I was in full agreement with how he played it, because she's so strong. So I guess he has to be so weak, and he was really... And I know, again, he was serving the play. I don't know if I liked it.
Well, if I could defend that a little
Sure.
bit, I think if I was directing this show, I would observe that we're seeing him through her eyes.
That's true.
So we're seeing what she was seeing as a weak man who wasn't supporting
I'll buy
her.
that.
Yeah. Well, because there's other characters who we meet that just don't even exist at all, right?
Yes.
So
spoiler.
Well, I didn't say who they were, but he. So to me, she's definitely the narrator of the story. She's the protagonist. She's telling us the story and bringing us from scene to scene.
Yep.
So I think any character we see, we're seeing filtered through him, except for towards the end where we start to see a little more reality.
Agreed. Okay, I'll buy that for $100. Okay. In any case...
You did. It's Broadway, baby.
It was Broadway. I was just about to... That's how I was bringing it home, that I get really futzy about spending money on things that aren't worth the value. And I just felt the quality of the acting, the quality of the directing and the set, the whole setting design. I adore when pieces all mesh together. Mm-hmm. When set meshes with thematics, and we were just talking about how it used all this multimedia, but it wasn't showy. It actually fit. Mm-hmm. Fit the piece and showed us some external stuff, and also was there to emphasize some internal stuff. Yeah.
Yes, and what was really cool, it wasn't money on stage, it was creativity.
Yeah.
That was
Yes.
not an expensive set. I'm sure they spent a lot of money on it, but you could recreate something like that for not a lot of money.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Yes, I say that with definitiveness as we bring this to a close and not trail off into nothing. All right, now we need to go find another show.
Okay.
Let's do
go.
it. All right, Craig, we did it. We went out and we saw another show, right?
Yes.
Okay. This time we saw a off-Broadway show. Very small theater, thrust stage. And we happen to be sitting in the front row. Which have you ever seen a play from the front row before?
Yeah, I'm sure I have.
Have you? All right. Well, I don't think I have. So there you go.
Well, I guess I'm a bigger spender than you
That's
normally.
right. So this play was called Bethany, new play, and I am reaching for the playbill to look for the playwright's name, which I should know.
Well, the playwright's name, do they even print it in the programs anymore?
Well, if they don't, I think that's pretty crummy. Speaking as a playwright. Look at that. There's the cast. Bethany by Laura Marks. Okay, so the reason that we chose this play, again, we knew nothing about it, right?
No, absolutely nothing. I knew that America Ferrero is in it.
Yes, who was on the TV show Ugly Betty. So again, we have another play with a brought-in person. And actually, this is going to work as a really interesting companion piece to The Other Place, which also starred a television person, but with much different results, I think. And the reason that we went for it is that, it got good reviews in the New York Times and the New Yorker, which I would inherently trust. And the initial story is, I thought, sort of intrigued me in terms of a woman who is sort of in this economy, things are falling apart for her, lost her house, and is
Lost her child
through custody because they were sleeping in a car, and is basically, in theory, trying to do whatever she can to get her daughter back. I think that's pretty much a good setup.
Yeah, she breaks into one of the millions of empty houses out there in the world because of the
foreclosure.
The foreclosure crisis. And she encounters a homeless person who is also moved in there, and they kind of form a bit of a partnership together.
Sort of.
In a manner of speaking.
In a manner of speaking, true enough. And then things go awry, as they do. So the first thing that Craig and I, when we left the theater last night, when we were talking about, because we were both pretty cold on it, is that when we're cold on a play, I always blame the script.
And I always blame the acting.
It's like, where our backgrounds come from? Okay, so Craig, you say, what did you think?
I thought it was a very strong cast, except for one person, and that was America Ferrera. And I went in. I didn't even ever really see Ugly Betty, but I went in going. I always go into these shows when there's a quote unquote star, hoping that they're good, and really giving myself really asking myself to give them more. Because you always have this nagging thing in your head that, well, if they're on a TV sitcom, they can't actually be really good actors. And I fought for this girl, and I fought for her, and there was a moment. There was a moment where there was like a loud sound effect in the theater. Remember, there was like this disturbing noise,
yes,
and the lights were out, and you and I just started talking at each other, and that's the point where I exploded because I was like, "This girl has no stakes in this show," and the entire play is about
her stakes,
and how important it is for her to get her daughter back. And I never, ever, ever felt that from her. There are, if you just go to basic acting techniques, your basic given circumstances exercise where you list, the things that are said about the character, like the facts that are known about your character. The fact that she is the number one salesman at the auto dealership that she works at, and she's a terrible salesperson.
No, she was the number one auto dealer at the last one. But even given that, there should be...
Well, she's a fantastic salesperson.
That's what we're supposed to believe.
Yeah, and we don't see that. We see it's like her stakes are sitcom stakes. It's like she when there was a social worker who came over to look at her house to see if it was okay to return her daughter to her, and her struggle, her fears and worries getting ready for the social worker to come weren't life or death worries or fears. They were like Mary Tyler Moore worries and fears from that show is like, oh, here comes the social worker, and I don't think that the weight of the script was much heavier than that. I never felt that. I never felt any danger, and there was even one very, very dangerous moment on stage, and I thought it was laughable, to tell you the truth.
Well, and then the thing that we're not talking about, too, is that there were some real issues with direction. There was a thrust stage. We were on the side. How often did we see scenes where an entire scene was played static so that one person sat with their back to us?
Yeah.
The entire scene. This is off-Broadway, people. This is supposed to be... This is what we consider to be the cream of the crop. And you're telling me a director doesn't know that if you're sitting in A1 or 2, if you don't have... instinct that, you know what, we should flex with the direction, flex with the blocking so that everybody gets a face. Mm-hmm. And it's very, again, we're talking blocking
this
101.
This is basic, yeah.
This is basic thing. I am by no means a good director, and I know that all you need is to flash a face, and there your audience will be sated.
Yeah, and we weren't even sitting deep into the thrust. We were sitting on the corner closest to the downstage edge of the stage, and we were getting blocked all the time. So I can't imagine what people further aloft were.
And there was
seeing.
one point where where the homeless man goes nuts and destroys the kitchen. Except it was the most carefully calculated. Okay, I am now going to bring the island, but I have to bring it down very, very carefully. And we learn later why it had to be done so carefully. But it was like, no, this is if there's going to be rage. Either rage, and I think there was supposed to be rage, and this is pretty much was what was missing from the whole play, from America Ferrera's character all the way down. There was you know what? Except for the social worker, who was a useless character, everyone had rage. And should have had rage. The wife, the guy, hey, the wife and the guy. You know, very vagueness for being here, but everybody should had a modicum of rage in them that never came out.
I thought the acting was pretty good.
Well, here's the problem, except for her, is that she has a sort of there's a protagonist, antagonist, and he should have been the weaker character, and by far he was the stronger character.
Because he was acting her off the stage. I think,
my gosh.
I think if she was a better actor, she could have risen, and they could have had a ballet,
duel.
A duel. They have a duel of sorts in the play, but you never felt that she had anything other than the lesser hand.
Oh, never. Okay, so here, my problem...
Talk about how terrible the writing is.
Well, no, it's not terrible, but again, you look in the book, and you look in the program, and you say, Julia, you're a trained playwright, and I have certain stakes, or I have certain expectations. I have an expectation that the characters are going to be well drawn. And this is a perfect antithesis to what we saw yesterday, 2 days ago, whenever we saw The Other Place. In that the small characters were actually vivid and had a point in their life, not just a point to act as a foil to the main character. And I didn't think, aside from the male counterpoint, who I think was acting, it was through acting that we saw
and the homeless man
character. Oh, he was okay. I think he should have been. I think that was acting. Actually, I'll give it that. I think that there was, but I just felt that the characters were there to serve us the story and not to be alive.
There were three other characters who I'm not sure what the point of them being there was.
And they could have been. I mean, they all had, like this.
They all had roles in her life.
Well, and they all had roles in their lives too. The social worker who, through budget cuts, is now going from house to house to house to house to house, meeting these. And it's this woman who she's talking with is the main character. She's a person of means who lost something. Mm-hmm. There should have been some kind of feeling from this character about what she thought. even if she wasn't supposed to. There was a supervisor at the plant not the plant, the sales floor, and I never got anything. I didn't know who she was, other than a very, very telling moment where she was supposed to provide some laughs, and that was it. And it had nothing to do really with character or story and I just felt, I don't know, I just really felt that well, the play is named after the daughter of the main character, and I should have felt the daughter.
I think you should have met the daughter.
Nah, I don't know if I needed to meet the daughter. Well, I needed to meet her in my mind. I never could visualize her. I knew she was 5, but I didn't know anything about her, and I didn't know anything. Well, and I think this is an acting thing, because I don't think America Ferrera has a child. I'm not even sure the director has a child, because there was no sense of motherhood and the fierceness of motherhood and the fierceness of I'm going to do anything and everything, and a notion that this character, I think, in other circumstances, would never think to do the things that she's doing. I think that's a really important point. A middle-class suburban life has been ripped away from you. What do you do?
But I think an actor can show that.
I think so, too. But I still think that there are...
I think I win.
I don't know, man. I think character development wins. And if you have poor characters, you can't... I don't know if you can act them off the page. Well, they couldn't. Right?
I will say this, too. There were moments in the play where there was laughter in the audience, and I do not think that playwright wanted laughter in those moments. There were moments where there were moments that the audience laughed at that I don't think that they were supposed to be laughs. I don't think it was supposed to be a funny play at all.
I think it should have been. I think it could have been. I think there were moments where the situation is just so absurd that they're put in. And I don't know, there should have been more discussion, because there was a lot of cleaning that happened on stage that had nothing to do, again, with the play. It had to do with, I have to make the set work for the next scene. And that's certainly acting. She should have, if America Ferrera is down on her hands and knees cleaning, I don't want to watch America Ferrera on her hands and knees cleaning. I want to watch this character in a desperate struggle for... to maintain that middle-class social or
standing
suburban life that is gone. Like, this life of hers is gone. And okay, maybe you do win. I don't know. In any case, that was Bethany. And
had monologues I want to steal from it.
You know what? Here, we'll end this on a really wonderful note about this play. And I think this is a meeting of both script and of acting.
Okay.
There's an opening monologue that makes it look like a character is in one location, and with one action, the actor takes it to a whole different location and gives you you're totally wrenched from thinking everything's going down one road to everything's going down the another road. And I think both Craig and I just went, that was the opening monologue, and went, yeah, we're in for a good night. We're in for a good night. And then things went awry. But it's so, when you go to these, I always, you gotta look, I think it's our job to be critical but constructive. Like, you have to look for, you can't just go and say, oh, that was crap.
No.
Because it wasn't.
No.
And it's important to acknowledge that it wasn't.
That's my big problem, and I think that's why I could never really be a director, is that if everything isn't 100% perfect, I have a hard time.
Well, I gotta wonder how
accepting anything
this play
else
was directed, and what America Ferrera was like as an actor to work with, because I think that the problem lies in that the director did not service the play.
Okay.
There we go. And
cue music.
Cue music. Scene.